The year is 2002, and the world is on fucking fire. Only a year earlier, President George W. Bush has declared the war on terror after a few terrorist attacks struck a bunch of buildings in the United States. Tensions between India and Pakistan are high. The Balkans are still recovering from the Yugoslav wars. South America is in economic crisis. The US has invaded Afghanistan, and in the year after is only set to get further involved in the Middle East. And a railroad was born, called the Montreal Main and Atlantic. Now hold on there, mister. I know you're probably thinking something like, well, for EDS, there's like 20 other videos about MMA that go into depths about it, so why should I watch yours? Well, let me explain why I'm making this video. This video isn't as serious and is a bit more lighthearted and comedic when talking about MMA, especially since, well, there are a bunch of jokes I feel like I can make about this. The second reason being that, well, unlike most people who happen to cover MMA, I am actually Canadian. And well, as I'm sure you can tell, MMA was founded in Canada, though admittedly I am not from Quebec, and even if I was, then I probably wouldn't be speaking English.
Your mother!
So buckle up, strap in, because you're going to learn about a railroad that you probably confused for boxing based off of the initials alone. So, as I'm sure you've heard me say, the year is 2002, and Rail World decides to make the people of Quebec suffer by spawning this demon known as the Montreal Main and Atlantic Railroad. The people of Quebec are already suffering, though, because they are French! So, you know, I'm not too sure how much of a difference MMA made. The president of Rail World, who looks like if Jared Fogle and Steve Jobs had a baby, was like, you know what? Let's pour $60 million of investment into this company that surely will be a success. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? The Demon Spawn was doing Demon Spawn things, taking over old Canadian Pacific lines, and also, well, building a very interesting roster consisting of locomotives from the 60s to the 2000s. Safe to say, this is one of the weirdest rosters I think I've ever seen, but you know what? Shoot for the stars, kid. Now, while Rail World was busy doing other things, MMA was mostly chilling, except no, they weren't, because the paper and lumber industry began to decline, and the leadership of MMA must have shit their pants instantly because they decided that, you know what, this calls for extreme budget cuts! They immediately responded by cutting their workforce down to 275 employees. The salaries, they need to be halved by 40%. Keep on pumping out those garbage locomotives to go on our unsafe tracks that we cannot keep maintenance of. There's an economic crash in the US that's affecting our entire industry. Grab the shotgun. You know what time it is. That's why it's time to budget cut even more. Cut down the employees to only 2-man train crews. Only use outdated locomotives from the 60s. Our locomotives are catching on fire on the regular. That's not an issue. Just buy more of them until we find ones that work. Good infrastructure, who needs it anyway? Let's instead use a lot of our money to pay for loans. We're totally going to be able to pay back. You know what? I do suppose we could give these two locomotives an official paint scheme of ours. But sir, we don't have the money for design. Yeah, rip it off from a random railroad. Ain't nobody going to notice. Sir, we're struggling to become profitable and we're on the edge of bankruptcy. All of our investors have pulled out. What do? It's those damn employees. Grab the shotgun. We need to lay off more people. It is absolutely incredible how this company went from a value of over $60 million in 2003 to 1,000 in 2008. And by the way, what you heard moments ago was not me over-exaggerating. The company, in order to save itself from going bankrupt, decided to cut more employees, cut salaries, buy more cheap, worthless locomotives, and decided that they need to cut down train crews to 2 men. It is absolutely mind-boggling the process this railroad went through to try and save itself in the midst of a dying industry. And guess what? The worst part is we are still not done. In between 2009 and 2010, while MMA was trying to recover, they decided that the best course of action was to cut their employees down to 175, and also decided to bring down their 2-man train crews to 1. the seeds of what happens next is being planted. MMA all did this because apparently this was estimated to save them about $4.5 million, when in reality it saved them absolutely none. Now, MMA still had a few million left over, and they could have spent that on fixing their absolutely atrocious railroads or buying modern locomotives, but instead it was used paying off loans that they borrowed from Quebec investing companies that, safe to say, weren't too happy with what MMA was doing. But it's safe to say we've been building up to the moment you've all been waiting for, and probably the main reason why you know of MMA in the first place. Because in a single day, this railroad that most people didn't even know existed would irreversibly change North American railroading forever. Alright, let's get on with the show. Late in the night of July 6, which while recording this was actually just one day ago, in the town of Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, which is right here on the border of the US, an MMA train parked not too far from the town, designated only as MMA2, consisting of XBN MMA C30-7 5078, C30-7 5028, CITX SD40-2, 3053, which funnily enough is actually an ex-Canadian Pacific, another MMA C30-7 5023, and a ex-Union Pacific CEFX SD40-2 3166, and 72 loaded tanker cars were sitting on top of the hill. Now, if you want a more in-depth look about the crash, then I recommend you watch the video made by the Thunderbolt 1000 Siren Productions, though I'm sure you've probably seen it before, but hey, it's still a good watch. I like it myself. Now, mind you, I'm not going to go very in-depth about the crash, so sorry if it sounds a little scuffed, but basically due to a pressure drop in the brakes, the unmanned train pretty much rolled down the hill towards the town of Lac-Mégantic, and in the span of a few seconds, the town went from a quiet, still, peaceful neighborhood to a living inferno. It is crazy to think how one random railroad that barely anyone knew about was able to piss off pretty much everyone of the North American region. It is insane. So how did MMA react when they saw this? Well, they practically imploded on themselves. MMA immediately turned on every form of damage control you can think of and was bending the knee to every single public demand possible. But this wasn't enough to save them from the hands of the Canadian NTSB. But guess what? They still had debt to pay, and now that they're out of money, those investors don't look too happy. MMA tried their best to hold on, improve their business, and, well, carry on like nothing had happened, but the damage was irreversible. No one ever wanted to work with MMA again, and their reputation was completely and utterly guttered. It was the end of MMA. The changes MMA tried to implement came too little, too late, and in 2013 they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and were properly vanquished from railroading and were never heard from again. But then a new railroad came into existence. Up from the ashes of MMA came the CMNQ, which I don't even want to talk about. They were known for so little. Like, genuinely, I think they were better than MMA or something. I mean, they had a better paint, at least. I'm gonna be completely honest here. There's absolutely nothing notable about the CMNQ. And then the GOAT, Canadian Pacific, came back with the slam dunk and completely destroyed the CMNQ, buying it out in 2020. And now, Canadian Pacific was back with the lines that they had sold off in the first place. Anyways, sorry for the abrupt end. I'm currently recording this, so I'm taking a drive in my minivan. Anyways, thank you for watching. Like and what is that?